We are going to discuss IMF, that is International Monetary Fund. So let's take a look at the membership. So the IMF currently has a near global membership of 189 countries. To become a member, a country must apply and then be accepted by a majority of the existing member countries. Now there are two types of membership, original and ordinary membership. So all those countries whose representatives took part in the Bretton Woods conference and who agreed to be the members of the IMF before 31st December 1945 are a part of the original membership. On the other hand, all those who became IMF's members after 31st December 1945, they are a part of the ordinary membership. Whenever a country joins the IMF, it is assigned with a quota which is based on its relative size, the country's relative size to the world economy. So what is quota or quota subscriptions? It is basically the amount of money that all members have to pay to the IMF after joining. 25% of that amount has to be paid in the form of SDRs, that is special drawing rights. We will talk about it later. And the rest of it, that is the rest of the 75%, has to be paid in country's own currency. And since quota subscriptions are decided according to the size of the economy, so larger the economy, larger will be its quota subscriptions. But along with that, the benefits will also be larger, such as voting powers. So the size of the quota determines a member's voting powers in decisions of the IMF. So each member country has 250 basic votes, but for every 1 lakh SDR that the countries have to pay for quota subscriptions gives them one additional vote. That is why larger the economy, larger its quota and larger the benefits as well. And also the amount of funds that a member can obtain from the IMF is also based on their quota subscription. An IMF member can borrow up to 200% of its quota annually and 600% cumulatively. Let's see what are SDRs, that is special drawing rights. So it is basically an international reserve asset which IMF uses as its own currency. But how is the value of the SDR decided? The value of SDR is based on a basket of major currencies which are used internationally. So these currencies are the US dollar, the euro, Chinese yuan, Japanese yen, and the British pound. These currencies are reviewed every 5 years and then changes are made accordingly. Why are only these currencies used? Why not others? Why? Because these are the dominating currencies in the international market. So they are more stable than other currencies. You can see in the table given that different member countries have different quota subscriptions and their voting powers and voting shares are based on those quota subscriptions only. So for example, United States has the largest quota, so its voting basic votes, number of basic votes and the voting share is also the largest, that is 16.52%. So larger the quota, larger the voting powers as well. Now let's take a look at the governance structure of the IMF. So there are board of governors, there is a ministerial committee, there is an executive board, and each of these have different roles. So let's take a look at the board of governors. So the Board of Governors is the highest decision-making body of the International Monetary Fund. It consists of one governor and one alternate governor for each member country. The governor is appointed by the member country itself, and usually it is the Minister of Finance or the head of the central bank of that country. So functions like approving quota increases or special drawing right allocations, admitting new members or withdrawal of any existing members, all these functions are performed by the Board of Governors. The Board of Governors and the World Bank Group normally meet once a year. Then there is a ministerial committee. So the IMF Board of Governors is advised by two ministerial committees. One is the IMFC, that is International Monetary and Financial Committee, and the other is the Development Committee. So the IMFC has 24 members which are drawn from the pool of all the governors, that is 189 governors. And lastly, there is the executive board. So this is a 24 member board which takes care of the daily business of the IMF. Together, these 24 board members represent all the member countries, that is all 189 member countries. Now let's discuss the financial resources of the IMF. First is the quota subscription. So as we talked earlier, the countries which become members of the IMF have to pay some amount as their subscription. And these quotas determine the voting powers and how much can they borrow from the IMF and their share in allocation of SDRs, and also the country's role in taking IMF decisions. And as I said earlier, the larger a country's economy is in terms of its output, the larger is its quota subscription as well. Now the other financial resource is gold. So the IMF holds a very large amount of gold among its assets for any unforeseen emergency or contingencies. Because of IMF's large gold holding, it has become the third largest official holder of gold in the world. Now let's take a look at some of the relevant MCQs based on what we just discussed. So question number 1 is, the value of special drawing rights, that is SDRs, is determined by a basket of how many currencies? So the correct option is option B, that is 5. So let's recall what those currencies are. The US dollar, euro, Chinese yuan, Japanese yen, and the British pound. Next question, voting rights in the IMF are determined on the basis of. Second option is correct, that is option B, size of the economy. So larger the size of the economy, the larger will be the voting rights of the member country. Next question, special drawing rights is also known as, option D, paper gold. Next question, which of the following countries has the largest quota subscription? So if you take a look at the table given, you will see that USA is at the top. So it has the largest quota subscription among all the countries.